Thank you, and I want to thank Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Warren for having this important hearing today because, as I think we all recognize, the housing shortage in our country is something that is creating problems in all of our communities across the state, across this country. And in my state of Nebraska, that's certainly one of the things. We talked a lot about rural housing, and that's one of the things that we worked on when I was governor of Nebraska and had success in coming up with programs to be able to do it. And certainly we heard the stories, and maybe some of you have heard it in your states and Senator Rounds in South Dakota, where we'll have somebody in a small town be offered a job to move to that small town, and they come and can't find a house that's suitable, and so they turn the job offer down, and that is a big hamper to our rural communities growing. So being able to cut through the red tape, come up with some of the solutions is one of the things that I think is important for us to take a look at. In Nebraska, we created a rural workforce housing bill, which provides $7 million to start with, that was available for communities to apply for this grant. And then the way most communities end up using it was creating this grant to basically create a revolving fund so that developers would be able to get a low interest loan to be able to come to a rural community and build houses that would then be available for that community and then repay that loan so it could go back to the community and be loaned out to the next developer down the line. And as I said, this was tremendously successful. And to your point, Dr. Glazer, one of the things that it's allowed, for example, is developers in our, can make more money maybe in our bigger cities, but wouldn't want to come to a community because it was too expensive. They would actually be able to find it would be economically viable and build, say, 12 homes at once to be able to get more toward that mass scale and be able to bring down the cost of the home. So for example, in Central City, a developer was able to build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, 1,380 square feet, on the market right now for $209,000. So very affordable to be able to get people into those homes so that people could take the jobs in our rural communities. I just talked to the mayor of Ralston, Nebraska. They're using our middle income housing fund, which we developed as a follow-on, to be able to build a 120-unit apartment complex. So same kind of idea though, grant programs, refundable, revolving funds essentially. Now, we also used ARPA dollars to be able to help do this, but the ARPA dollars had to be one-time used. And so the problem with the federal dollars is they were too restrictive. And so we couldn't use them in the same way, so it's a one-time shot, which was nice, but it's not creating long-lasting value. Anyway, Dr. Glazer, I wanted to talk to you a little about some of your research on some of the things because we're talking about creating more supply. First of all, University of Chicago, great school. I'm an alum, so great job getting your PhD there. You talked about the zoning and how that is impacting the cost because we're restricting what the land use can be for. And studies have shown up to 24% of the cost of a new home could be that zoning requirement. What about some of the other things? The ranking member mentioned, for example, building permits. Or what about just the availability of finding people who can do the job in the first place? Shortage of people in the trades. Have you done any research or seen any research that talks about those sorts of problems and what we might be able to do to address them? Microphone.
That great question. Let me differentiate between the two ideas that you put forward. First of all, permits are a local government issue. They're really important. Time to permit is really important. I think the sort of nudging against local legislation that we've been discussing would be helpful with those as well. If we put an expectation that states are going to have to build in their most productive counties in order to have access to certain discretionary spending, those local counties are going to have to figure out how to get their permitting faster, right? They're going to have to move themselves down from a 7-year process. The workforce is different. I think that there is a role at particularly the state and local level, but I'd be open for a federal program if it were well constructed to do more vocational training for lots of places in the U.S. I think in many cases, sort of smart vocational training that wraps around existing education provides an exciting option. But again, I'd like to see that legislation in place before I endorse it. I'd like to know how much money we're talking about, and I'd like to see evaluation of the programs. Part of the beauty of vocational training is you can pay for performance. You don't need to pay the person unless they've actually learned how to become a plumber, learned to become a programmer. There is a question as to whether or not something about the global financial crisis permanently broke the construction industry. I don't believe that. It is true that we're down about 200,000 people as a whole, but we're up 100,000 in remodeling. So in some sense, what excessive regulation has done is we've changed us from being a nation of builders to being a nation of remodelers, because the permitting process is easy for remodelers. But in the cities that build, like, for example, Dallas, Texas, they're right back where they were before the global financial crisis. So I think it is possible to get the people back. But again, as a strategy to think about in a holistic human capital strategy, thinking about a little bit more in vocational training, I think that's worth doing.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Glazer.